MZTV.
I don't know if you noticed this. Well, you probably have. We live in an occupied land. No matter where you are in the body of Christ, no matter what continent you're on, no matter what city you're in, you are not at home. We are all foreigners, no matter where we live in a foreign world, and it is not run by our people. Our people are not in charge. The world's people are in charge half the time. We don't know what they're doing, but I have great comfort for you concerning this living in an occupied land. For one thing, it's temporary. It's temporary. And I'm going to give you, via the book of Jeremiah, instructions on how to live and prosper while we're here in an occupied land. I'm going to look at 5 historical occupations, 3 ancient, 2 modern, and I'm going to tell you how we are blessed above all others. We are. I know. You think, well, we're just another occupied people. No, we have an advantage that none of the occupied peoples I'm going to describe for you had. And you're going to feel better after this video than before. And that's always my goal. This is Martin Zender, and you are at MZTV. Yes, the rumors are true. I'm the world's most outspoken Bible scholar, voted unanimously. Well, there was one holdout, but because of a letter writing campaign, the one holdout finally saw the truth. And so, yes, I'm the world's most outspoken Bible scholar by unanimous decision. So the first occupation would be the Jews in Babylon, 587 BC. The Jews were deported into Babylon by decree of God. And in Jeremiah, I'm going to get there after I give you the list of these occupied peoples. We're going to see how God told them to behave in the foreign land. I mean, from Jerusalem, their homeland, taken to Babylon, the headquarters of the world capital. I mean, that could not have been a good time, but they made the best of it because they listened to God. However, there were false prophets telling them other things. In fact, we have, not prophets today, but we have people giving us false advice of how to behave in our occupied land. And we're all occupied, no matter, again, as I said in the beginning, no matter what country you are living in. Second occupation would be the Jews in Egypt. We know that because of the famous Ten Commandment movie. Not only that, but we can read about it in Exodus. The Jews in Egypt were afflicted for many years. And they were, this was worse than Babylon because they were enslaved. Well, they were technically enslaved in Babylon, but the Babylonians didn't make them build pyramids in the heat of the day. The pharaohs did. The third would be the Jews in Palestine under the Romans at the time of our Lord. We know the Romans ran the show, and they were hanging around every street corner, and they were very persnickety about what you could do and what you couldn't do. For the most part, they let the Jews continue with their religious rituals, but there was always someone looking over the fence at you, always somebody watching your back, and you were never comfortable. And really, are we comfortable here? No. I'll speak for myself, but I think I speak for most of you. We're not comfortable here. Those are the 3 ancient occupations I want to bring before you today. There are 2 modern ones. The French in World War II being occupied by the Nazis. The nasty Nazis, they wanted to take over the world a la Hitler, and so Hitler invaded several countries, starting with Poland. He invaded France, and then the tanks rolled into Paris, and like the Jews in the first century, there was a Nazi hanging out at every street corner, and it was very uncomfortable. It was very sinister, of course, but you had to play by the rules, because if you didn't, they would shoot you or worse. The number 5 occupation, this is the one that touches us the most because we are the occupied people. I'm going to read a passage to you eventually from the book of Hebrews. We are foreigners in a foreign land. We are expatriates. We don't belong here. But again, we get good advice if we look at how God instructed the Jews when being taken to Babylon. And anyone would be wise to observe these recommendations. And in fact, Paul in Romans 13 basically says the same things that God said to the Jews back in 587 BC through Jeremiah. But there were false prophets then. There are false advisors today, and I'll be getting into that. So let's get into it now. What does God tell the Israelites to do as they are being taken to Babylon? One thing we need to know is that this was a discipline of God. They were in Babylon for 70 years because they did not observe the sabbatical year, let the land lay fallow. And so for every sabbatical year they missed, the sabbatical year comes every 7 years. Apparently they missed 10 of them. It was a discipline of God. And we find an account of this in Jeremiah. I want to go first of all to Jeremiah 27 and starting with verse 9. No, wait, let's start with verse 5 because this sets the stage. Oh, this is good. I didn't even write this down, but I'm looking here at verse 5. This sets the whole stage of how God is sovereign, and he does things that you don't expect him to do. Listen to this. This should be a comfort to us because I don't see how he's changed his motives over the years. I myself made the earth. I'm in verse 5 of Jeremiah 27. I myself made the earth, humanity and beast that is on the surface of the earth by my great vigor and by my outstretched arm, and I give it to whom it seems upright in my eyes. It doesn't say that he gives it to upright people. He gives it to whom it seems upright in his eyes. In other words, this is an upright thing for God to do, to, in many cases, put people in power who are not upright. Just don't want you to get confused there. And now I myself give all these lands into the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, my servant. My servant. This is incredible. Calls this heathen king his servant. And of course, we know Nebuchadnezzar had no clue, no inkling whatsoever that he was God's servant and he was enacting God's counsels. And even the animal of the field I give to him to serve him. All nations will serve him and his son's son until the era of his own land comes. Even it, when many nations and great kings will force service by it. The rule of Nebuchadnezzar was limited. It would come to an end. Other armies, namely the Medes and the Persians, would take over. Medes are bad enough. But when you mix them with Persians, somebody's going to take over the world. It's a bad combination, Medes and Persians. Always hate to see it when it happens. Fortunately, it hasn't happened in a long time. Verse 8, yet it will be that the nation and the kingdom that is not serving him, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, and that is not putting its neck under the yoke of the king of Babylon, I shall visit that nation with sword and with famine and with plague, averring as Yahweh, until I am finished with them by his hand. So God is purposely doing this for the discipline of his people. And he says, if you don't put your neck under the yoke, then, things are going to go even worse for you. And then listen to this in verse 9. Again, I'm in Jeremiah 27. As for you, do not hearken to your prophets, to your diviners, or to your dream interpreters, or to your cloud consulters. This is a concordant version of the Old Testament. Cloud consulters? This is a new practice. I've never heard of this. Consulting the clouds. I see you being bogged down. I see your business getting a very slow start. I see your plans and dreams plodding along. Why do you see that? Because the cloud today looks like a turtle. See that cloud? What does it look like? A turtle. I'm so sorry. the cloud consulters, or to your enchanters, who are those speaking to you, saying, this is what the cloud consulters and the enchanters and the dream interpreters, the diviners, were saying. You shall not serve the king of Babylon, for they are prophesying a falsehood to you. And they said, no, 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 don't serve the king of Babylon. But God says they're prophesying falsehood to you, with the result that you will be removed far from your ground, and I will drive you away, and you will perish. If you do it my way, and I'm going to give you God's way here, coming up very shortly. You do it my way, you'll be fine. If you do it their way, resistance. You see, because pretty much resistance is futile. I will drive you away and you will perish. Yet the nation that brings its neck under the yoke of the king of Babylon and serves him, I will leave it on its own ground, averring his Yahweh, to serve it and dwell on it. A couple more verses here. To Zedekiah, king of Judah, I also spoke according to all these words, saying, bring your necks under the yoke of the king of Babylon, serve him and his people, and so live. Why should you die, you and your people, by sword, by famine, by plague, just as Yahweh speaks to the nation that is not serving the king of Babylon? Do not hearken to the words of the prophets who are speaking to you, saying, you shall not serve the king of Babylon. It's a falsehood. They are prophesying to you. For I did not send them, averring as Yahweh, yet they are prophesying falsely in my name, with the result that I will drive you away, you will perish, you and the prophets who are prophesying to you. Also to the priests and to all this people I spoke, saying, thus says Yahweh, don't hearken to the words of your prophets. Okay, we got all that. Okay, now here's God's instructions. After this, I'm going to move on to the Jews in Egypt. But here we go. These are God's instructions, starting in Jeremiah 29, verse 4, and going through verse 8, of how to live in an occupied country. And Romans 13 agrees with this. It's in accordance with this. The same God is instructing. It is unusual that an instruction of God way, way back there in 537 BC would be the same instruction in the first century, but it is. I mean, not to the letter, but the principle of subjection to the superior authority. Jeremiah 29, 4. Thus says Yahweh of hosts, Elohim of Israel, to all the deportation which I deported from Jerusalem to Babylon, build houses and dwell in them, and plant gardens and eat their fruit. Take wives and beget sons and daughters, and take wives for your sons, and give your daughters to husbands, that they may bear sons and daughters. Increase there, do not decrease. In other words, I want to see some procreation going on in Babylon. It'll probably shake up the Babylonians, just like the Israelites definitely procreated and multiplied in Egypt, to the point that Pharaoh got kind of nervous and ordered all the newborns to be killed. But apparently nothing like that's happening here. I think Nebuchadnezzar is a little more decent than Pharaoh. This is incredible. Verse 7. Seek after the well-being of the city where I have deported you, and pray to Yahweh in its behalf. This goes perfectly along with the end of Romans 12, where Paul says, render good for evil. Render good for evil. Don't respond in kind to evil rulers or evil anybody. If it's in you, respond softly to evil provocations, if you can. Depends on how far the Spirit of God is developed in you, because, of course, you cannot do this except the Spirit of God makes its home in you. The Spirit of God does make its home in you, but we have the Spirit in measure, not in totality. So sometimes we're not going to do too well, I should say, in this department. Seek after the well-being of the city. Pray to Yahweh in its behalf for its well-being. Oh, this is a great point. For in its well-being shall be well-being for you. That makes perfect sense. If the country to which you have been deported does well, then you will do well. So it's in your, this is ultimately selfish, but we're to love others as we love ourselves. You have to love yourself first. And so think of it this way, is that if you're compliant with the superior authorities, then things will go well for them and thus for you. For in its well-being shall be well-being for you. That makes a lot of sense. I know it's hard to do. For thus says Yahweh of hosts, one more verse here. I'm in verse 8, Jeremiah 29. Thus says Yahweh of hosts, Elohim of Israel, let them not lure you, your prophets who are among you, and your diviners. And let's not forget those cloud consulters. They're not mentioned here, but I got a beef with those people. Didn't know there was such a thing. And do not hearken to your dream interpreters, who you direct to interpret dreams. For with falsity they are prophesying to you in my name. I have not sent them, averring is Yahweh. Likewise today, this is a brief sidebar here. We have people who say that you don't have to be subject to the government when it becomes evil. If the government becomes evil, in other words, we are told that we are to set watchdogs on the government, the government of the foreign land where we are, and we're to obey them and be cooperative, compliant, as long as they're good. But as soon as they become evil, then it is our right to resist them and withstand them. No. In fact, none of Romans 13 makes sense unless the authority is evil, because Paul ends chapter 12. Well, I'll show you exactly how he ends chapter 12. Are you ready for this? I shared this with you the other day as well, but it's good to repeat this. We're talking about living in occupied lands. Be not conquered by evil, but conquer evil with good. Conquer evil with good. And then right after that is chapter 13, but there are no chapter headings. Paul didn't clear his throat and say to his scribe Tertius, chapter 13. No, he just ran on in the following manner. Be not conquered by evil, but conquer evil with good. Let every soul be subject to the superior authorities. You see, I just ran right over the chapter heading. In that context, the superior authority has to be evil, or it doesn't make sense. You don't need to be exhorted to be subject to a superior authority that is good. So it only makes sense if the superior authority is evil here. And so this should help you know how to behave in the world today. I mean, it's the same thing with the Jews in Egypt, the Jews in Palestine under the Romans. I mean, Paul says, not in vain is the authority wearing the sword. He says that in Romans 13. And I believe that much of the persecution of the Christians that we hear about, I mean, it's legendary, right? Being thrown to the lions and all the terrible things they did to the Christians. I'm convinced that this happened to militant Christians, like Christians are today, who defy the authorities. When the authority tells you not to meet, you don't meet. And yet they have the catacombs under Rome, and so Paul is basically warning the saints there. I don't believe any of the saints in Paul's ecclesia. There were many who were probably called Christians, but who weren't true Christians, just like today, although everybody called a Christian today is not true. But I think Paul's people, that list of beautiful saints at the end of Romans 16, I believe that they were all spared because Paul told them to be subject to the superior authority. So if the authority said, wherever they were, if the authority said, you're not to gather, they did not gather, and they trusted that God was behind it. Well, why wouldn't they when Paul says there is no authority except under God? Now those which are have been set under God. Verse 2, so that he who is resisting an authority has withstood God's mandate. So the evil authority is God's mandate, just like Nebuchadnezzar was God's mandate. It's very rude to go to another people's land to destroy their little home, destroy their temple, and take them as slaves into captivity. Very rude, very rude. And yet God says, this is of me, and if you withstand it, you're withstanding my mandate. That's why I see the similarity between Romans 13 and Jeremiah 27, 28, and 29. The French, the Nazis, nasty Nazis. Am I glad that the West and the East, the Russians and the French and the Brits and the Americans, am I glad that they resisted Hitler? Yes. But I personally could not have killed people, even though it was a righteous cause. For sure it was a righteous cause. A better example. That's not a good example because The Germans were not our superior authorities. In France, that was the case, but in America, we were not occupied, and so we went to war to fight people. That is notwithstanding the superior authority. In fact, the draft was in operation then, so the superior authority said, we pull your name, you're in the army, son, and so you would be obeying the superior authority actually in World War II by going in. Same thing in the Vietnam War, even though that was an unjust war. You would be obeying the superior authority if you went into battle. I'm not saying it's always, you can always do it. It's just the ideal. It's the ideal. You can't always do it. I know I'm going to get arguments. What if they tell you to kill your kids? Well, give them the finger. But if you did kill your kids because the superior authority told you to, then you would have recourse before God. I couldn't do it. But if you did it, you would have recourse. God's not going to say to you, why'd you kill your kids? Well, you told me to be subject to the superior authorities. I know I'm going to get lots of, I shouldn't have even said that. If I'm smart, I will edit that last section out about killing your kids, please. I hope I'm not stupid enough to leave that in the video, because that's going to be the one part everybody focuses on, please. Okay. Us in the world. And we go to Hebrews, of course. Hebrews 11:8. By faith, Abraham, being called, obeys, coming out into the place which he was about to obtain to enjoy as an allotment, and he came out not being versed in where he is coming. That's okay, but I like this latter part better. Verse 13, in faith died all these, not being requited with the promises, but perceiving them ahead and saluting them and avowing that they are strangers and expatriates on the earth. For those who are saying such things are disclosing that they are seeking for a country of their own. This is not our country. Whatever country you're in, this is not our country. It's not our planet. Our realm is inherent among the celestials. Verse 15, I'm in Hebrews 11, and if indeed they remembered that from which they came out, they might have had occasion to go back. Yet now they are craving a better, that is, a celestial. The Jews were looking for a city out of heaven, a celestial city. It wasn't its location. The celestial city they were looking for was a city that was celestial in nature, that came out of heaven. And you're going to see that here. Wherefore God is not ashamed of them to be invoked as their God, for he makes ready for them a city. And we know that's the New Jerusalem. It's a celestial city in that its origin is among the celestials, but it comes down to the new earth. So don't get any ideas here that Paul is teaching here in Hebrews that the Jews have a celestial destiny. They're just looking for a celestial city, a city that originates among the celestials, but comes down to earth. There's one great thing about all these occupying forces that I just named. Every single one of them was eventually destroyed. Yes, this is great news. I saved it for the end of the video. The Babylonian Empire was crushed by the Medo-Persian Empire. Remember what I told you about the Medes and the Persians. But the Jews continued. They survived because they obeyed God. Egypt. What happened to Egypt? I don't know. Go to Egypt and look at the pyramids. You don't see too many pharaohs hanging around there anymore. If you want to visit Egyptian culture, go to the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City and visit the Egyptian section, and you'll see pottery and all sorts of nice things from a dead culture. You might even see a mummy there. I can't remember if there's a mummy there, but you can visit mummies. That's what happened to Egypt. They became mummies, and the culture went to rot. Went to complete rot. That's what happened to Egypt. What happened to the Roman Empire that occupied Israel in the days of our Lord? It was demolished, dissolved. No more Roman Empire. All these occupying forces, while they seem so scary and authoritative at the time, which they are authoritative at the time, but they are all destined to be doomed. But God's people are destined to live, to survive, to go on. The Nazis were crushed. In the two modern examples, the Nazis were crushed by the Russians coming in from the east, the Americans, the French, and the Brits coming in from the west, and Hitler shoots himself after he poisons him and his wife, Eva Braun. They married just a few days before then. Happy honeymoon, honey. Oh, Here's some poison first. You take that, you die slowly. I'm going to shoot myself and die quickly. Achtung! Great honeymoon, Dolph. Way to treat a lady. And our occupation, the occupying power that we're under, which is the entire earth, its destruction and all the systems of the earth is detailed in the book of the unveiling of Jesus Christ. Every single occupying power I have mentioned in this video was destroyed, and the only one that is yet to be destroyed is the one that is lording it over us, trying to lord it over us, but we're not letting it because we are just easy to get along with. We're not going to stoke any kind of rebellion. We're not that kind of people. We're like Jesus before Pilate, who was silent as a sheep before the shearers, saying, you would have no power over me unless it were given to you from above. The people in our occupying on this earth who try to lord it over us, forget it. Don't let them do it. Just get alongable and things will go well. But it is slated for destruction. It's going to go the way of Egypt, the way of the Babylonian Empire, the way of the Roman Empire. It's slated, scheduled for destruction. And yet, what about us? We're going to go on. We're going to go on. Just as the Jews are continuing to go on in spite of all their occupations. The French still exist. What do you know? The French are still there. But Nazi Germany is gone. But here's the thing I've been saving for the end of this video. Our advantage is that when we lay low and fly under the radar, this world does not give a rat's ass about us. That wasn't so with Israel during the Babylonian captivity. No, they watched their every move. Certainly in Egypt, the supervisors, the taskmasters watched their every move. They were scrutinized. Likewise, the Jews in Jerusalem. There was a Roman around every corner making sure that you kowtowed to their authority. The Nazis in France. Well, you had to be careful. You couldn't protest. There couldn't be more than 4 or 5 people gathered. If the Nazis saw you gathered with a bunch of people, they would think you were plotting a takeover, and they would break it up. They're watching you constantly. And every one of these occupations I'm mentioning here, except this one, our occupation. The world, Paul says, I've been crucified to the world and the world to me. This is great news. The world doesn't care about me. I don't care about the world. It's mutual. And we just live mild and quiet lives. And we are not scrutinized by them. Live in such a way that they don't give a damn about you. That's perfect. That's beautiful. We're just putting in our time until we get the hell out of here. And that day, ladies and gentlemen, is fast approaching.